There we go. Yay. All right, let's try this again then. So I feel like we're on recording. So Teresa and Darby is on the team, so she can definitely chime in on this conversation. But so what their team has done is they have made this online peer mediation platform. And these are all the folks who are on the team right now. And they've been in many of these Zoom meetings, as you can see, Darby's in there too. Next month, Undine is going to be doing a webinar too. So in case you want to join in, I was given a site to show you guys what that is. So you can join in next month if you like.
Yeah, that
These
one's
people,
on social emotional learning during the pandemic. So
that'd be great.
It'd be really good.
Yeah, I think all this sounds fascinating to me. So the folks here, I've listened to them speak, and they're all amazing professional folks who seem to have quite an in-depth knowledge of this peer mediation. The OPMP started by was funded by JAMS, and then they went and were managed by this association, and now they're managed by NAPPP is who they're managed by. Oops, submitted. Okay. From there, they have a website that you can go to. And I've been on this website and it's phenomenal. There's just all types of resources. There's past webinars, present webinars that are on there, and a lot of resources that are free to look at. And then it's also a way to contact them if you want to get in touch with any of the members, that you can also go to the website and do that. They have 4 main goals from what, and as I was reading about it. So their first goal is this online resource on peer mediation. And again, when I went to the website and as I've been looking around it, there is just numerous articles that you can read. And under these particular areas, useful links, best practices, standards. Dr. Morton was telling me that standards is something a lot of people don't realize that OPMP has, that there actually are standards. So that was something that's very important that's listed on their website. Then again, they have videos also. Their second online training in basic peer mediation skill, their second goal is this online training in basic peer mediation skill. And the idea there is they want to show how students can teach students. So schools, they basically are teaching schools who then teach children how to be, or students rather, not children, students how to be peer mediators, and then how to do that online. So they have the ability to show other schools then how to do this kind of work and give and demonstrate these kind of programs. Then they have goal 3, which is online peer mediation skill. And this is more of possibly, as I understand it, is schools that already have peer mediation, that they can practice with simulations and hone their skills. And then the team from OPMP can give them some feedback and some review on what that looks like. And there actually are videos online that show a simulated video of what that actually ends up looking like. So that is their third goal. Then they go on to goal number 4. And this is somewhat in the future. I understand some of it they are looking into right now is what they would be doing is they would be helping peer mediators who are already in schools to actually reach out to other schools that don't have peer mediation. And then they can help guide them to guide other schools via their program and how they do their work. And then this seems to be very important is that if a student is to reach out or to find their website, they would never directly deal with the students individually, but they would end up dealing with their faculty or their other teachers instead of dealing directly with the student, but they could go through their faculty to get information on how the peer mediation process works. And then that leads them to trying to partnership. My understanding, listening to the professionals who are on the team, they're always looking for partnerships dealing with OPMP. and that qualified trainers and people who could be part of the team at any given point is that something else that they do look for. And then that leaves them down to services. I found this very interesting. I didn't realize that these kind of programs were out there, but they offer this 32-hour training program, and that it gives you the eligibility to receive a certificate from the Association for Conflict Resolution. And then those participants will be eligible to apply as trainers and consultants. So I thought that was a nice opportunity that they offer. Then they also offer this organizational conflict resolution training. And my understanding, what I have read about this, it seems that this also then branches out to, let's say, something other than a school, that they can take this same program and branch out to a small organization. I think of small businesses or any business or any organization that could benefit from this type of training. And again, both of you have talked about the level of stress that people have. I'm sure it runs across the gamut with all industries. I know it does in the work that I do and the people I work with. So this is something else that they offer. Then this restorative teaching student mediation for school administrators. I found this also to be extremely fascinating. I found the reading I've done as I've been working on my internship and through reading for my master's is restorative is justice, I guess, is one way of putting it, but that seems to be to restore respect, and to do this type of training seems to be on the forefront of a lot of training when it comes to mediation and conflict management. So I found that very interesting that they also offer training in restorative teacher-student mediation. And then this is something where I guess with what I'm doing, and then as they're working on this program, is for those students who maybe have been through and had classes or some touch to mediation processes through school, whether it's junior high school or middle school or high school, that as those students move into college and maybe into degrees that associate with conflict management or mediation, that then they'll reach out to those college students who then can help high schoolers who might be a little less experienced in the process. So I understand that that's also part of their one of their goals, and that they're trying to work on as they go through what OPMP is working towards. And then that comes down to just reminding people that they do have all these webinars. Darby's webinar, of course, will be posted. And there are previous webinars that have been done that are in there. Some of them are extremely interesting. I've read a lot, I've watched a lot of them. And then lastly, is they do have, like a lot of people have a YouTube channel, and then that you can view, which then leads us down to just their website that I highly suggest that, take a look at if you're new to it, or let some of your other faculty members know about it, because it has a lot to offer. I find this organization really could make a big difference in a lot of schools. So that's mine, and I'm going to get done sharing, and then I'm going to let Darby in, and so that she can give her, I'll let her introduce herself more and then tell us what she's going to be talking about. So I'll get out of here. And Darby, I'm going to put you as the host. Yes. All right, Darby, you're on.
All right. Let me find the screen. And this is my first time using a PDF as a thing, so let me know if it works out okay.
Okay.
Is that full screen now?
It is, at least it is for me.
Okay. So I am forming a community called Trauma-Informed Pedagogy. And right now, teachers are in the middle of, crisis schooling with COVID. And I am an educator. I'm currently teaching online. But I've also worked in the classroom, and I'm involved in a lot of different trauma-informed education groups. So based on what I've been hearing in the different communities that I'm in and from my teacher friends, I decided to try to address some of the common questions people were asking about how to handle all of this during COVID. And this is what I came up with. So the first thing is to focus on connection and relationship and not instruction. And everything comes back to connection. If you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs or Burton's human needs theory, it really covers like students being able to learn when they feel safe and connected and um, when their basic needs are met. So it's important to think about creating school environments where basic needs get met first instead of just focusing on instruction as usual, because we have no idea what's happening outside of the classroom environment, whether they have sick family members or have lost someone or, don't have Wi-Fi access. Um, so teachers should use brain science to think about how they're engaging and working with their students. And if you think about the triune brain, hi, Teresa. Thanks for joining us. If you think about the triune brain, and I like Dan Siegel's hand model of the brain, like the brain stem is like survival mode. And even teachers are in survival mode right now. Like we're going through the motions, we're showing up, we're warm bodies in the classroom. But we're like living in survival mode and we're not able to focus or concentrate or be productive. And our students are experiencing the same thing. But in the prefrontal cortex part of the brain, like this top part of the brain, that's where all the higher level thinking and learning and executive functioning happens. So that can't be accessed unless basic needs are met first. So always refer back to neuroscience as to what students can actually, get done and not get done. And another thing is students, if they can't access that prefrontal cortex, they're not going to be able to communicate their needs, or they may not say, I'm terrified right now, or I'm really frightened, or I'm anxious. Students don't always have the capability to express, um, you know, what they're feeling or what they're experiencing. They may not relate feeling tense or nauseous to to feelings. So we need to keep that in mind. Or I always go to the students that sleep in class or that shut down. They may not be able to express, I'm dissociating or I'm overwhelmed. They're just shutting down. So those are things to keep in mind when teachers are working with students that are difficult or having problem behaviors, that it's a behavior, it's not necessarily, it's a symptom of something else, not that the student's just being difficult. So in order to circumvent all of this, teachers should make time in class to build relationships with students. And I like to do this through circles in my classrooms, but circles are one way. Having like downtime where you can just bond with the students and having time to play games with the students is really, I think, crucial, especially now. So I want to go over like an example of what this might look like. If students feel safe and nurtured, they're going to be able to learn. So when you're building those relationships, when you're creating an environment where they can like leave the outside world, out in the hallway, and they like really look forward coming to your classroom and just relaxing into it, if you hold space for them, their basic needs are being met and they'll be able to learn. So in a classroom that has no connection, I don't know how long your classes are, but say like a typical class is a 50-minute block. So imagine the students come right in and they get to work immediately on bell work or worksheets or whatever the teacher has them doing, whether it's online or in person. And the whole thing with streaming online all day long is not a good practice. Like I'm an online teacher now, and I've taught online for Connections Academy in the past, which is like a nationwide online school. We do not teach online all day long every single day. It's just not a best practice. Maybe 1 or 2 live lessons a week for each subject, but not all day long. So there needs to be downtime. So in a class where there's no connection, there's maybe a 30-minute lesson or even a 50-minute lesson. And if students don't get their work done in class, they have to take it home and do it as homework. And it's just a lot of busyness. Compare that to a class that starts out with connection, having a circle for 10 minutes, and people get a time to like de-escalate and ground themselves. And then you teach a lesson for 10 minutes, and then students can work together for 10 to 20 minutes. And then they have another 10 minutes to just rest and have like a brain break. Which classroom do you think is going to be more successful and regulated and have less behavior issues? These are things that I've done in my classes where I spend more time on connection than I do instruction, and the students actually excel in their grades. So there's a lot of different ways that you can ease into this as a teacher if you're not used to doing that. So my first question to think about is, what can you do in your classroom to build connection and relationships with your students? And I don't know if you want to spend time discussing any of this or not, but it's just something to think about.
No, I mean, it's so right that to try to work on that. I mean, even for like, I'm a school counselor, but we have Google Classroom set up for each of our grade levels.
Mm-hmm.
And I try to post something on there like positive or silly or something for them to interact with, even if it's just with each other. Like they don't have to necessarily get back to me, but it'll be something for them to comment on. And the kids, especially my fully remote kids, because I have like a small group of kids that are fully remote, they love it. Like
Yes.
it'll be whatever national day of whatever it is. And they'll like be commenting about cats and dogs and whatever's going on. But like they need that. I mean, I also post like stuff they need to know on there too, but like they need to just have that interaction of, and it's not about school or it's, fun. And they're just happy to do that. We even like when we had like a national day to like stop bullying and they all had to wear blue, like they had to send me pictures of them and their blue stuff. Like
that's awesome.
It had to be fun, and it can't be super interactive at the moment, but it had to be somewhat interactive. And they were so excited. Like my 6th graders were so excited to send pictures. Like I have a whole like collage up in my office, but they loved it. But I feel like teachers sometimes forget when they're doing all the other important stuff to get their kids to buy in that way.
Yes.
Because even my husband, he teaches 7th grade science, he does like every morning he plays like a different song. And so like the kids like it, like Thursdays are throwback Thursdays. They like laugh because if it's not old enough, they don't consider a throwback. Like, but it's how like it's a fun way for them to start their day with him. And I think they really do need that, and that's how they get to know him as like a teacher. And like he'll play, like he'll let them pick a song. Like if somebody likes something that they want to hear, he'll play that one of the days. Like, but it's a good way to connect, have a little fun.
That's awesome.
A quick question on that for both of you. How pressured are you as teachers or counselors to get a certain amount of work accomplished in a 50-minute window that doesn't always allow for, and the reason I say that is because here in Texas, I'm just talking about local news, that these STAR tests and these tests that end up ranking schools, apparently like if your students do well, but they teach towards this test and they have this amount of work that has to be accomplished. And so I'm wondering how do you fight that against, let's say, upper administration to say that we need a 10-minute window?
I'm actually covering that later in this presentation.
Okay, I'll be quiet. Yes.
Okay.
Good. Okay.
So my next thing is just reducing the workload and grading, because teachers are already overwhelmed, obviously. Most teachers I know bring work home with them. When I taught online for one school, I worked 14 to 18-hour days. So I know the struggle is real. And now teachers are doing double duty, where they're teaching in person and having students online and hybrid settings. And the majority of face-to-face teachers have never taught online before. And that's a completely different skill set. So it's a lot of work that they're not used to, and they're trying to replicate the regular classroom in the online classroom, and that does not translate well.
Mm.
So for doing less work as a teacher and in the classroom, is I say busy is not always better. And I'm really saying this towards elementary teachers, I think, because I've traditionally taught middle and high school, but busy work is not good. And every time you hand out busy work, the students moan and some refuse to do it. And then you have to grade it. And I think busy work is like just a way that teachers have been like brought up to like say, this is what you do in a regular classroom. But busy work has in the past been used to keep students busy so they keep out of trouble. So I would say is being busy something that we want to teach students is like a norm? Do we want to model to them that they have to be busy 100% of the day? You know, like that being busy and productive 100% of the time is healthy and good, because what they're learning is children in their formative years, like that's embedded in their brain. So when we grow up now as adults, we feel like we have to be busy all the time, which is not healthy. So that's one thing on that. And it doesn't help learning. Like scientifically, our brains need breaks. Our brains need time to process. Just like when we sleep at night, if we don't get good sleep, we're not going to have a good day. If we don't have time to process what we're learning, it's not going to get filed away in our brain properly. So students need that downtime, like I mentioned before, like the downtime at the beginning of class, the downtime at the end of class, in order to process and file away so their brains can do that work. If they don't have that time, it's not going to sink in. So I would say take a break from from the busy work. And keep the instructions short. So only teach for 10 to 15 minutes. If it's elementary kids, you could do it even shorter. You don't have to cover everything all in one lesson. And like my previous position in adult ed is I was a GED teacher. I taught all subjects areas. I'm primarily a math teacher, but you know, I've taught for the FCAT, I've done end of course exams, I've done the GED exam, I've done the TABE test. So you want to talk teaching the test, I can talk teaching to the test. I'm used to taking the standards and putting them out on calendar saying, this is what I have to get done this month, and then breaking that standard down into little bite-sized pieces. And if you do that for the entire school year with like, say, a week or two cushion at the end, it's not overwhelming. And then I can say, okay, well, I know for say algebra, I have this standard on how to do a linear equation. And there's all these little parts about linear equations. And then every day I teach one little part. It takes 10 minutes. And then my students practice together, and that's it. You know, like I don't have to inundate them with busy work. I don't, unless they want it. You know, if they want extra work, then I can give them extra work. So really like changing our mindsets as educators, like how much work is really necessary to address the learning, to address the standard, is something that we should be asking ourselves. And I would say as a way to evaluate that, like look at all of the things you're doing in your classroom right now. Does this meet your objective of that one standard? And if not, don't do it. You know?
Sure.
So it's a good way to evaluate your current practices and saying, is this really necessary? And then I would say even further, you can evaluate it. Is it effective? You know, experiment, take a week or two with one standard and scale it back and see if the students are still learning the standard or not. And that can tell you if you really need to be doing all of that extra work.
Mhm.
So that's one key thing, to do less work. Also, teachers don't have to grade everything. There's
Oh,
formative and summative assessments, and most of the busy work or classwork is like the formative stuff where students are learning and they're exploring. They need to make mistakes. They need to learn that failure is okay and that mistakes are part of the learning process. And if they don't struggle, they're not learning. So if teachers are grading everything, like if they're grading all of the busy work, if they're grading all of the classwork and students are struggling with it, then it's teaching students that they're failures and that they're no good and they're not good enough. So if we really took focus off grading all of these daily classroom work, like the practice work where they should be free to explore and feel comfortable making mistakes, like it will model to them that mistakes are healthy. And I think Carol Dweck and Joe Bowler both have written a lot of books on growth mindset and math mindset and failing forward. And it's important that we teach students the failure is where the growth is. Like if we're not struggling, we're not learning. Instead of saying, you got that wrong, now we're going to move on to the next thing. So I think changing the culture, like of how students learn and what's acceptable and
mhm.
what's expected. Like I'm in as a math teacher, I may make mistakes on purpose. That way my students can be like, oh my goodness, you made a mistake. I'm like, yes, even teachers make mistakes because it's normal and it's healthy and that's how we learn and grow.
Sure.
So that's something, and by not grading everything, it cuts a lot down on the work. um, so I think that we should really stop grading every single little thing that we're handing out. Um, and then working smarter instead of harder. Um, right now, a lot of things are online or hybrid, and teachers can take advantage of that. I know there's a lot of programs that they've already been using, like iReady and other software programs that grade for them. And as much as they don't like to use them, just take the data from those programs and then teach many lessons on what needs to be covered. Like
Mhm.
I take data from those benchmark tests and benchmark programs, and that's working smarter. It's not making a bunch of busy work. It's like I'm targeting exactly what I need to do in instruction towards exactly my students' needs. Um, so there's other things like Khan Academy where you could assign homework in there instead of
Mhm.
creating a bunch of work from scratch.
Mhm.
So finding software that could be used in addition to your learning management system. Also, you can make quizzes on Google Forms or Microsoft Forms that the answers and grades go automatically into a spreadsheet, and you can use that data to
Oh,
tailor instruction or give students extra resources based on what they need. And then you're not hand grading everything. Same thing with rubrics. You can make rubrics to and I know a lot of teachers already do this, but what I think is important with rubrics is especially teach students how to use them. Have a sample project or paper or whatever you're using the rubric for, and and do it and record little videos on it so that students can use it to model their own project after. That way you're not doing extra work. Um, and also feedback. I like to do, say, a private YouTube channel or a discussion board, and I record feedback for my students because it's much easier than typing it. So if you like to type your feedback, type it and save it on a Word doc, and then you just copy and paste it for every student because they're gonna miss the same questions.
mhm.
um, Same thing with math. I record these little videos either on Zoom or Loom. I save them and then I just send them the link. I'm like, here's the link for this problem. Let me know if you have questions. And then if students still have questions after watching the feedback, they can schedule like a one-on-one with you or meet you in office hours. So there's a lot of ways you can reduce the work in a hybrid environment, especially. And the other thing is pre-doing the lessons, like recording videos in advance, like a flipped classroom. can save a lot of time. That way, when you are working with the students in a live lesson or in class, it's more one-on-one, meeting their needs instead of all time spent on instruction.
Mhm.
Everything that we do, teachers should understand students are at the center of the learning. So connecting with students is important, and go to the mindset where students are co-creators of knowledge. Like, the traditional model of education is hierarchical, so teachers are at the top with all the powers, and then students just have to sit and listen and behave,
Mhm.
which is the reality in most classrooms still. But in like a power with model, students and teachers are all together. Like, I always sat in a circle with my students in physical classrooms, but students should have a choice and should be able to contribute and should be able to get up and teach and make mistakes and say, well, I really like doing this activity, but not that one. So I always would try and organize my resources to say, okay, this is the standard. And then I could be like, we could do a Kahoot quiz on it. You could do Khan Academy. We could work on this worksheet. You could do it solo. You could do it together. By giving them choices as to what they want each day, the structure to be like, really engages them. And students can grade their own work. They can grade each other's work, so you can take a lot of the work off of the teacher and put it on the students to create knowledge together and to correct one another and to counsel one another, like in peer mediation, so that the teachers aren't always doing everything, because that's, frankly, it's exhausting.
Mhm.
So when we create a classroom environment, whether it's in person or online, students can learn that they're in charge of their own learning and that they can help one another. And you're just kind of like providing the format and the resources for them. So if you're not already doing this, it takes a little bit of time to slowly transition into it. But just like any beginning of the year procedures, the students learn the classroom environment and your expectations. It's something that can be transitioned into. So I think that it's really important that students learn about agency and how to do this all on their own. And with the peer mentoring in the classroom, whether it's one-on-one or whether it's through circles, students can meet one another's needs for community and social emotional learning, if you provide the space and the time for them to do that. So instead of thinking that teachers teach and classroom is for instruction and getting work done, like, really reframe things into how can I meet my students' needs? And by putting students first, and not just instruction, you can make a huge difference. And I think, like, reframing your goals this way is stuff that will make a difference, like, long term in students' lives. And a lot of the things that I've just talked about and reducing the work and grading, most teachers are on a team, so they can work with their team and create resources together or share resources with one another so that they don't have to be doing everything on their own. you know so like, I like to make little feedback videos, and I would share those with the entire grade of, because we're all teaching the same thing in the same grade, so I would share that with my entire grade of math teachers, and then they all used it, and it saved them so much time. And then they would make something and, like, rubrics or a special assignment, and then they would share it with me. So we were always working, on our own strengths and sharing with one another, and it cut back the amount of work overall that we had to do. So that's really effective. um, And then there's things like systems and automations that you can be using. So like if you set up a schedule where the same type of assignment is due, you know, the same day every week, like every Tuesday is a discussion post or a video post, every Thursday is a quiz or test. It creates like a schedule and helps students to know what to expect. And I'll talk about expectations in a bit. But that's a good way to help. And having, you know, a frequently asked question discussion board or page for students to, if one student has a question, it's guaranteed another student has the same question. So you can make a public, well, public for your students, public answer for it, whether it's written or spoken or video, and then share it with everybody. And then it will answer people's questions. And that can really cut back on a lot of time you're answering emails, because a lot of the emails are asking the same thing or the Google Classroom messages or whatever it is. Another thing I like to do is, especially if students are new to online learning, is to create tutorials for absolutely everything and then have like a tutorial page or discussion thread. This is how you create a Word document or a Google Doc. This is how you save it. This is how you name the title. This is how you share it with me, you know? So the more little tutorial videos you can create for whatever learning management system you're using, that can answer both students and parents' questions, can really cut back on the amount of time that you're responding to email and frantic phone calls. So that's something that can help as well. And let's see. So the goal of all of that is to have systems in place that reduce your amount of work, but also meeting student needs. So what do you think you might try in your classroom to reduce the workload in grading?
Darby, I will tell you this, that, you know, being an older adult, it's interesting what you talk about in teaching younger people in the classroom, because I look at when I teach a training class to older adults, and there's always, like you said, this question that is on a board. So many people are, you know, there's always the one brave soul is really going to go out there and say, you know, I'm going to ask a stupid question. And everyone else is like, thank God, because I want to know the answer, but I'm afraid to ask the question. So I'm just thinking how beneficial that idea must really work, because it doesn't change just because you're 16 or you're 60. It's like people still have questions. Not everyone is brave enough to ask. So
Yeah.
having answers like that, probably, I'm sure it takes the stress off the people who, no matter how old you are, going like, man, I really needed to know that answer. I just wasn't going to ask. So that's a really cool tool. I like that a lot. That's super.
Even kind of going off of that, like I just know even for parents and students, like having like a step-by-step thing, like for kids to check before they even ask a question. So like, did you go to the frequently asked questions post? Did you look on, here? Did you look here? And then come to me, like, have you checked all those resources? Because I feel like that builds a skill too. Like, where can you look for this information first? And if you tried all those things, then, come ask ask a question or come see me or whatever. Because we've been trying to get parents to do that too, because parents will call us when they know something is on the website or they know where, but they want you to just do it or tell them. So like we've been trying to say, like, if you look at Google Classroom, if you look on Parent Portal, and then you look at this, you should be able to find everything you're asking for. And then if you can't find it, then come ask. But
yeah, and a lot of it is connecting, especially if you're doing virtual anything. The majority of my time as a virtual teacher is spent on the phone, connecting with students and parents. Weekly calls, tracking the contact on a spreadsheet. And that's what I see is that's what's lacking in what's happening right now with COVID education and these hybrid models and school districts moving things online, is the teachers aren't connecting unless it's like in the classroom, right? They're not connecting with students one-on-one through phone calls or video chats. They're not connecting with the parents and or caregivers, and it needs to happen. in order
Sure.
for it to be effective.
Right.
Sure.
No, and
Yeah.
they need to know to make time for that, because I know it's
Yeah.
different than whatever they've done before. Like you didn't
Yes.
need as much because you had them in the classroom, so you knew you would see them tomorrow. And now we see them twice a week if they're if they're hybrid, or if we have fully remote kids, you're not seeing them, so you have to connect with them in a different way than you've ever had to before. Like
Yes.
it's such a different mindset to even go into. Like even for my fully remote kids, I make sure at least once a week I have some sort of conversation with them, whether it's through
Right.
email, it could be on the phone, it could be like my, in my Google Classroom, but I have to like see them in some way,
Right.
just to make sure they're okay, like, and that if they need
Absolutely.
something, because it's going to be even harder for them to ask the question because they won't even
Yes.
know who to go to.
Right.
Um,
Right.
So it's
Yeah.
so different to think about. And I think, I don't know, in the teachers that I work with, I feel like it's just hard for them to get all of that figured out. Like, how do I give myself in that way that I know I need to my kids, but also when it takes me 9 hours more to do my lesson the way that I used to, like, it's just complicated.
Yes.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah. It's definitely a different mindset, which is why I'm trying to talk about it.
Yep.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well,
Yeah.
and like these tutorials, as you were saying, I mean, I just think of the people who think they get it, and then they get home and they don't get it
Mhm.
anymore. They thought they had it, they're writing their notes while you're talking about it online, and then, poof, squirrel, and then next thing you know, they don't, and the tutorial would allow them to go back and take it, slide at a time. That's awesome.
Right. So the next thing is being flexible. And a lot of this is mindset. The first thing is working around your energy. And a lot of us probably don't have any energy right now, which is why self-care is super important and sleep is a priority. But just like with sleep cycles, you have energy cycles, and some people are very energetic in the morning. I am not one of them. And some people, get really sleepy after lunch,
Mhm.
which sometimes is me. But I tend to get like a second wind later in the evening, like right now. And so when working online, I'm like, I set aside a chunk of time after dinner so that I can work, because I know that I can get a lot done in 2 hours after dinner.
Mhm.
So working around your energy is important. Also paying attention to your students' energy, whether you're in person or online. A lot of students are not going to have a lot of energy early in the morning, which is unfortunate for first block teachers. so kind of plan your day around that, whether you have students all day long, like the same students, or if it's different blocks, like make room for them to rest into your classroom, like we already talked about, or even do exercises or yoga or something to get them moving, breathing exercises. I really like the Headspace app and the Calm app, which I get for free as an educator. I might be grandfathered in, but they might have a discount now. But they have like little quick 3-minute videos where you can do stretches with your students. Or like you mentioned, your husband plays music, have a dance party at the beginning of the block, get their blood flowing, Or I know OPMP does scavenger hunts with their students. So just anything to get them up and moving can help boost energy and help them to focus.
Mhm.
So that's something to keep in mind, especially if we're in front of the computer all day long, is we do need movement. And also we need, like brain breaks so that we can rest and focus.
We've even done that for like on Wednesdays, we're fully remote. So, and we run some clubs and activities that are after school, but we'll have kids like bring your cat or dog to the meet, kind of like, it's a little fun. It's kind of like show and tell, even though they're middle schoolers, and it's stress relief for everybody, because they're like, oh my God, look at the cute puppy or whatever. And then they still like, they'll get back to doing whatever we need to do, but they're like so happy to just be like, look, this is my pet.
Yeah.
That's cool. That's a really great idea.
Another thing is addressing, bias. All teachers have bias, whether we want to. Oh, I'm not biased. Yes, you are. Let's just agree that all teachers have implicit bias, even if we're not aware of it. And that's why it's important for us to really reflect on our experiences growing up in school, what those were like. We expect our teaching experience to be just like that, which isn't always the case. So if you grew up in a suburban area and now you're teaching where there's a lot of diversity, your classroom's going to look and act much differently than your own experiences. So addressing your history, beliefs, and biases can shape what you're doing in your current practice. And there's a lot of great stuff going on about implicit bias right now, especially with the racial tension that's happening in America. So if you're not familiar with any of it, I highly recommend, digging in and learning more, because it does impact your students, whether or not you're saying things actively out loud. So that's important to know, like, to be able to meet your students' needs, you have to know them and you have to meet them where they're at, and you have to accept them for who they are, not try to change them into the perfect little student that you want. So that's something that, like, I do with my students is nothing they can say can shock me anymore. I predominantly work with urban and at-risk youth, and I do not write students up for, well, at the high school or GED level. I don't write students up for cursing or for saying inappropriate things, because they share with me and they share their lives with me and they trust me. That may make a lot of teachers uncomfortable, but if you really want to connect with your students and love them for who they are and meet them where they're at, sometimes it takes, being uncomfortable, and meeting their needs when it really needs to be met. But letting a lot of things slide can help with that. So, and I also suggest, meeting with other teachers and connecting with them, whether they're on your team or on social media and private groups, or like through the community I'm building, is to share stories and say, I'm struggling with this. How should I react? Or what can I do? A student said, blah, 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 like, obviously keeping things private unless it's a reportable thing that you have to report. But we're here for one another, and we're a community as educators. So please don't hesitate to reach out to other teachers if you feel comfortable or you're struggling with a certain student behavior or how to respond or react to something. Managing expectations is really important. I've said it before, I'm going to say it again, that we're in the middle of a crisis. And even if we weren't in the middle of a crisis, we still need to manage our expectations to what we think a classroom should look and feel like, to seeing every student we're dealing with is dealing with trauma. And it doesn't have to be like a horrific trauma. It could be, oh, I'm fighting with my sibling kind of trauma, or my parents are getting divorced trauma, or I dropped my lunch on the way to school trauma, like, it doesn't matter what it is. All of our students are dealing with issues that they're bringing in from outside the classroom into the classroom. And that affects their ability to learn and their ability to behave. So going back to, human needs theory, let's focus on meeting their needs first by connecting with them, by listening to them, by feeding them. I always had snacks in my classroom. So that helps get the brain out of survival mode and into the mode where they can focus and learn and concentrate. So the goal is to have a learning environment that's safe and nurturing and comforting before anything else. So focus on the environment first and connecting first, and then instruction can follow. So we think of being teachers as being instructors, but really we are facilitators. We're creating environments where healing and connection happen instead of just having instruction all the time. It's currently 8 o'clock and I think this was supposed to last an hour. So I don't know if you're comfortable with me going over or not. I can keep going.
It's up to you guys.
Okay. So obviously things are very uncomfortable this year, even scary. And from what I'm hearing from teachers is that they really don't know how to deal with these things, with some of the things parents are saying to them, with some of the things that students are saying or experiencing even, you know, like with the racial stuff, with COVID, with the online school process, like it's all very overwhelming and that's okay. And I think that we need to acknowledge that it's okay to be scared or terrified or overwhelmed or uncomfortable. And that our students are also feeling the same way and their parents are also feeling the same way. It's a collective feeling. And if we push that down and if we pretend that everything is normal, it's going to come out in our bodies and we're going to feel tense and we're going to get physically sick from trying to avoid these emotions. The emotions are normal. They're normal because of everything that's going on. And we need to acknowledge that. And if a student does express something like this, then we need to say it's normal that you're feeling that way. We need to acknowledge that we're feeling these things almost on a daily basis. And how to meet those needs first before we focus on instruction. And teachers are like, well, I'm not a social worker. I'm not a counselor. I'm not a therapist. I'm hearing this from teachers. I didn't sign up to be a social worker. Well, this is where you are, and this is what you need to do to get the job done. So if you want them to be able to pay attention and act good in class, then focus on those big scary emotions and feel them and feel the feels, you know, because it's part of social emotional learning. We have to teach students how to feel those feelings and process them. And anytime there's an unwanted behavior in class, instead of looking at it as problematic or I just want to get the student out of class, look at it as an unmet need. Constantly going back to human needs theory and not having, you know, basic needs met, whether a student is, you know, out of control or they're sleeping or they're absent. Look at it as an unmet need. Why is the student avoiding being on camera? Maybe they live in a house with 5 other people, or maybe they're in their car in a parking lot, or whatever it is, you know? So reach out to that student privately and connect with them and find out if there's a way that you can meet their need, or adjust whatever it is you're doing so that it doesn't become an issue anymore. And just a second. I'm just going to mute. Okay. So those are some ideas about being flexible, especially right now with COVID and everything else that's going on. So a question to think about and reflect on is how can you stretch beyond your current comfort zone as an educator and be flexible in your classroom? Okay. Another thing that's going to help students feel more regulated and safe is being predictable and consistent. So stress in our body is going to be heightened when there's a lot of unknowns. I know that is for sure for me. I like to know what's going on and I like to be told in advance, and I kind of like to have a plan, but then I can like be flexible and sway from it as long as I have expectations. And as teachers, we have expectations for learning to happen, you know, and that's not happening right now because there's all this unknown and fear going on. So the more structure that we can provide by having like a set schedule, by letting students know what the expectations are, by having these little tutorial videos, can all help reduce stress and, you know, the physical symptoms of stress. Oh, I'm going to Miss Darby's room and I know that we're going to start off with a circle and then we're going to have 10 minutes of instruction. So having like a regular routine, having, you know, days of the week to do certain things, being consistent and how you talk and how you react and the consistent contact, you know, weekly phone calls, make sure that you're emailing or texting or however it is you're connecting with your students, that can help them to feel a lot calmer. And even parents, the more communication you have with parents can help reduce student fear and anxiety because they get a lot of fear and anxiety from their parents, especially surrounding math, but that's another webinar for another time. So just alleviating questions can help reduce stress, and it can help students to regulate their nervous systems. And I even say you should add in like meditations and breathing exercises and dance parties and exercise to help them learn how to regulate their systems. So that's really important. And then Vander Kolk, who wrote The Body Keeps a Score, really important trauma book. If you've never read it, it has a lot of great applications on how to reduce trauma. But he said schools can function as islands of safety in a chaotic world. And this is something that I like really latch on to because students may be coming to school to get away from, you know, a really bad environment. Not all homes are happy, not all neighborhoods are safe. So school may be that one place where students go to have calm, to have security. So how can we make our schools and our classrooms into islands of safety? What would this look like online even, you know? And we touched on it before, just making sure that teachers and guidance counselors are reaching out to students and families and caregivers on a regular basis and connecting with them, not just on Google Classroom, not just on Focus or whatever their online platform is, but really like scheduling meetings and scheduling meetings and making phone calls and texting, like more than just like classroom update, but like really connecting with them. I always like to keep like a little running Word document or spreadsheet where I take notes, you know, and be like, okay, well, so-and-so had a baseball game and so-and-so was playing Fortnite or whatever video game. And so-and-so just started doing anime. Like I take notes on my students. That way, when I touch base with them, I can ask them about it and keep the conversation going. And they love that, you know, they're like, oh, you remembered that I was doing that? Just like sharing their dog or their cat, you know, like bring in stuff outside of class to connect with them. It's really, really important. The connection is everything. And this is the last section. So focus on empowering students and families. Encourage student voice and choice. And this goes back to giving them choices. And they really long to be in charge of their own learning. If a teacher's constantly like, you have to do this, there's going to be a lot of students that just don't do it. We know a lot of students that just do not do a lot of the work and they still pass. I personally know a lot of students like that. And what I found is they don't have to do a lot of work to pass. They don't have to do a lot of work to learn the material. So hopefully teachers will embrace that to reduce the workload, but also giving them choices. You know, do you want to work on on a worksheet or on Khan Academy? Do you want to work on this or on that? Give them a choice between, if there's 5 problems, say pick 3. Anywhere you can give a student a choice, they will be more motivated to do the work and the assignment and get it done. If they have a locus of control, then they're in charge of their education, and they get to say, oh, I'm going to choose these 4 problems, and they'll get it done. Instead of having to do 20, they could choose 4 and still show that they master the material. If they didn't master the material, then follow up with them. But it really reduces the amount of work overall when you don't have to nag the student about not getting work done. You don't have to get in fights with the parents about it. You don't have as much grading. So think about ways that you can encourage student choice through the variety of assignments or how many problems they're actually getting done, which is an accommodation that many students already have on their IEPs. So I find as an ESC teacher that what you're doing for students on your IEPs, you can do for everyone. Just make accommodations standard for everyone. And it cuts down on the workload. And during COVID and everything that's going on politically, as we're taping this, the election is literally like a few days away, which is causing a lot of stress. People feel out of control. So the more that we can do to give choice and control, like give them some sense of control in the classroom, can relieve their stress. And that, I think, can really help too. So circles I've talked about before. I like to start off my class sessions with like a 10-minute circle. It's a form of restorative justice. Many schools already have restorative justice plans, which may or may not be implemented very well. But even if they don't, any teacher can do a circle. It's just a time where people can connect and answer a question. How are you feeling? What's going on? Are you anxious? Or like I would play a card game with my students as we would talk. And they really loved it. They called it family time. But they would not start class unless we did a circle first. And it gave them a chance to de-escalate, to transition from one class to the next or from wherever they were coming from. Everybody got a chance to talk or not talk if they chose. And it is just a great way to check in and see overall how the class is doing, because if the class is all high stress, you're going to know you need to spend more downtime just connecting with them. So that's really good way to get them to have a calm nervous system. And it's preventative. So if you do daily circles, it will prevent conflict and fights and behavior that you're trying to avoid. And this is crucial. If teachers are self-regulated, they can help students to be self-regulated. So if you're coming into class and you're super stressed out, you haven't slept and you have distractions, your students are going to feed off of that. Or if you have a student that's acting out and you respond by snapping or, whatever it is, your students are going to react to that too. So that's why I say, like, I have learned not to react to anything my students say or do, and it calms them right down. Any adult that's working with a child or a teen, if you respond or react to them, which they want, like their brains are feeding off that reaction, like they may not want to be yelled at, but their brains are feeding off of it. And then it causes more conflict and more stress. So if teachers practice self-care and practice being calm and practice not reacting, it will help students to do the same thing. So I make self-care a priority for myself. I work from home. I'm teaching online. So I have that working for me. I choose not to start my day until later because I'm not a morning person. I make sure to exercise or hike almost every day. And I start every day with like an hour of meditation, because if I don't, I do not function. I take breaks when I need breaks. So I would say like a third of my day is spent on self-care. And everybody's like, oh, that's not realistic. I don't have time for that. But if you cut back on the amount of busy work that you're doing and grading, you can do it, you know? So it's just a matter of prioritizing yourself first, you know, put yourself on your calendar first. And then do you really need to grade all 50, you know, daily assignments? No, you really don't. So find other ways to check to see if the students are getting it or not. Do a quick poll online or with Poll Everywhere, you know, or do it in Kahoot. And then you get an overview to see if they get it or if they don't get it. And then you don't have to grade it. So that saves you at least an hour where you could be spending it on yourself or with your family. So I'm going to be doing a whole series on self-care at another time. I'm not going to get into that right now, but be on the lookout for it. And just kind of like, you know, what fight, flight, or freeze feels like in your body. I've done more on that also. It's on my website. So I won't cover it a lot here, but if you want to read the blog post on this particular section, it will go into a lot more detail. And what's the next thing? Acknowledging and reframing fears. A lot of what we're doing right now is, like I said, Dan Siegel says you have to name it to tame it. And I mentioned before, we have to acknowledge that this is a scary time, or that we're anxious, or that we're stressed, or that we're physically not feeling well because of being overwhelmed and anxiety and everything that's going on. So modeling this to students, you know, like I could start off in my circle during the day with my students, say, today I'm feeling a little anxious, you know, and this is what I'm going to do right now to help my body calm down. And it feels like I'm a little tight in or funny in my stomach, or my shoulders are really tight. And then like do a calm down exercise, like a breathing exercise or a journaling prompt. And being able to do this with students and help them to reframe their fears and saying, okay, well, right now it is a scary time, and I can do this exercise to calm down, and then I will be able to focus, you know, kind of using like the whole CBT or DBT reframing techniques. It's okay to feel scared and still get work done. You know, you can feel two opposing things at once, or I'm really anxious and I'm excited. Like you can teach them to reframe things. Circles can also be used for goals and planning and accountability. So if you use your circle to say, what do you want to focus on today? What exercises would you like to do? For math, would you want to do this? Would you like to work on the computer by yourself? Would you like to work on a group? It's a good way to check in with students and see, give them options and a chance to talk about what it is that they want to do. And students, as you're doing this, like they all know one another's goals, they all know one another's struggles, and they hold one another accountable and support one another. And I think that's a huge part of what's missing in a lot of classrooms, is instead of the teacher being the one to do everything, is giving it over to the students, you know, teaching them really this is what being a team is all about. And then last thing is creating a resilient community of care. And circles can be used outside of the classroom. You could have circles with your team of teachers. You could do it with parents of your students or your caregivers of your students. You could do circles or facilitated dialogues with people outside of the school, with community agencies, because a lot of parents are really struggling right now with job or income or rent assistance. So connecting them with the community agencies that could help them meet their needs is important. Really having like a holistic educational environment where not just their intellect is being fed, but like all of their needs are being met, whatever that is. And especially in New York, I know a lot of homeless students, you know, like, do you know how many homeless students you have at your school? How can we help meet those needs? And allowing them to come in and use a washing machine at school or shower at school, making sure the whole family gets fed, not just the student. So there's a lot of ways that schools can connect families to community resources right now, especially with COVID, and people not working and people losing their jobs and places to live. We could work with the people, not just the students, but their families and the community in circles and dialogues to learn how to talk with one another right now and connect with one another and say, okay, these are our needs. How can we meet them together? And it, you know, it teaches conflict resolution skills and it models mindfulness and self-care. So I think that if your schools aren't already doing these kind of things on a regular basis, it's something that could be looked into and started. And it's definitely something that me and the online peer mediation platform can help with. So just think about ways that your school can create a culture of safety, or an island of safety, as Vanderkolk said, to address whatever the current trauma is and empower students and families.
Very nice. Yeah. Darby, when you were talking about empowering students and so forth and parents, the kind of work I do, oftentimes the word gets put out as it's called silo thinking. If anyone knows what a silo is, or they've ever been near or around a farm, it's just this whole tunnel thinking, and it doesn't go out, and people with good information aren't sharing and don't, or are thinking something and don't think anyone else has that problem. So oftentimes when we're working in groups, it's like we try to tell people we've got to get out of silo thinking, that, you know, it's empower others to bring in information, give information. So I love your way of thinking that that's the way to help, you know, that the teacher doesn't have to be the only person who's smart. You know, students are allowed to be smart. They're allowed to share information and maybe have a great way of doing something, you know, and if nothing else, just the fact that they're at a level where their peers may understand their explanation even maybe better than the teacher's explanation, even though the same answer is being said. So I often think that's awesome that you think through that way, letting students be smart when they can be. So
yeah. And I mean, it all goes back to connection. If you're not connected, if you don't have those relationships with your students and their families, you're not going to know their needs, and you're not going to be able to connect them with people in the community. So that's why circles or dialogues or online check-ins, online Zoom hangouts, whatever you want to call it, you know, find ways to get people engaged and show up. And that does, you know, like happen through those phone calls and connections. Like the small things build up to like the bigger levels of engagement. So yeah.
Even this year I'm trying a new thing with sending postcards. It's like a proud parent postcard. I'm trying to do it at least like a couple times a week with different kids for different reasons, just so that there's a good positive connection to school. Because I feel like they're just missing the regular stuff. Like we're not having like school dances, and we're not having fundraisers, and we're not having all this stuff going on. So they need to get some fun stuff from school. So I've been trying to do that. So far it's been received pretty well. Like the kids respond really well. Like I'll get emails like from even though it's sent to the parent, the kid will thank me. But I think they need anything we could do that builds that positive connection.
Right.
Sure. That makes sense.
Yeah. So I have written a whole series of blog articles on this, and it will be shared on my blog on Trauma Informed Solutions, and also on the online peer mediation blog on Blogspot. Oh, and we'll share it. It'll be shared on social media too. So
Okay.
if you want to connect with us on social media, I am on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, at Darby Munroe and at Trauma Informed Solutions. And the online peer mediation is at OPMP Team and Online Peer Mediation on Facebook and Twitter. So that's where you can find the recording of this. And I will be sharing the blog post links on social.
Yeah.
So that's it.
Okay, very
All right.
nice. Let's see if I can do this.
I'm gonna stop the recording.
Okay. Send. Teresa, that is also, so as you can see, Darby's webinar is great. And then there's going to be more, and Dr. Morton wanted me to share the next one too. So, but I think if you look, I mean, I'm new to their whole organization, but I'm amazed at the resources that are online for them. They have a lot of information there that, it's just free to read. So I think that you'd be very impressed with the work they've done and what each individual is capable of doing, in the sense of giving information.
Okay.
Darby, you rock.
Thank you very much.
So, yeah, Teresa too. But, all right. Well, Teresa or both Teresas, either of you.
Oh, yes, two Teresas. Bro, I'm trying to find you in Twitter. Here you are.
Yeah, so if you have any other questions or anything I can help with or answer, like I'm more than happy to make a video or write a blog post about it. So
Very nice.
yeah,
That's great.
thank you for
so
coming.
much.
Oh, thanks for joining us. So we appreciate it.
Thank you very much. I want to
Thanks,
say
Teresa.
something. I really
Please.
love one of your last phrases, the one that says, schools can function as islands of safety in a chaotic world. I think that's a great, great phrase,
Yeah.
because I
Yeah.
really believe the same.
I hear you.
Mhm.
The importance of the schools, the institution, and the importance of the teachers, our work, how can we help children and students, primary or secondary students, to face and live this situation in the best possible way.
Mhm.
Mhm.
That's why I love it's an island of safety.
Mhm. Yes.
I love it. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
All right.
All right, so the recording will be available soon and the blog post will be on both of our blogs, as I mentioned, and shared on social. So stay on the lookout for that.
All right. Sounds
And-
good.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks
you.
for coming.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
All right.
All right. Well, have a great night then, ladies.
All right. You too.
Bye-bye.
Take
Okay,
care.
bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much.
Good night.
Oh.
Oh. Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Hola. Para que me estoy despidiendo en Zoom.